I found out I had been replaced on a Wednesday morning, standing in a hallway that still smelled like floor cleaner. It wasn't dramatic, no confrontation, no raised voices, just a document I wasn't meant to read. I had come early for an appointment I didn't schedule myself. The letter said it was recommended. That word again. Neutral, polite, impossible to argue with without sounding defensive. The receptionist handed me a clipboard and asked me to wait. I chose the chair near the wall, the one where you can see both doors. Habit from another life. Someone had left a folder on the counter behind her. Open, careless, the kind of carelessness that only happens when people assume you no longer matter. My name was on the tab, not handwritten, typed, centered, official. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't curious. I was standing close enough to read without leaning in, and what I saw made my chest tighten in a very specific way. Not fear, not anger, but recognition. That wasn't me. The man described on the first page shared my date of birth and address, but not my history. Generally compliant, relies heavily on others for decision-making, tends to agree rather than understand, shows limited initiative. I read it twice. The sentences were calm, professional, carefully worded to sound compassionate while quietly removing authority. It was written by someone who knew exactly how to erase a person without calling it harm. I closed my eyes for a moment, then opened them again and read slower. No accusations, no diagnoses, no overt lies, just a version of me that no longer required consent. I stepped back when the receptionist turned around. She smiled, asked if everything was all right, and slid the folder out of sight as if nothing unusual had happened. I nodded. That's when I understood something important. This wasn't a mistake. Mistakes are clumsy. This was smooth. I sat down and waited for my name to be called, my hands folded loosely in my lap. Anyone watching would have seen a quiet older man, patient, unbothered, exactly as expected. Inside, I was reorganizing years of experience. For most of my life, I worked in environments where language mattered more than force, where outcomes were decided before anyone realized a decision had been made, where people lost control not because they were weak, but because they didn't notice the moment their voice stopped being required. I learned early that the most dangerous phrase in any system is, "It's already been handled," because once something is handled, objections become interruptions. When they finally called me in, the woman across the desk spoke gently. Too gently. She explained procedures, options, recommendations. She used my name often, as if repetition could replace inclusion. I listened carefully. She never asked what I wanted. She told me what we usually do. That was the second confirmation. By the time I left the building, I was certain of three things. Someone had been speaking for me. More than one institution had accepted it. Everyone involved believed I would not resist. They weren't wrong about one thing. I wasn't going to resist. Not yet. Resistance makes noise. Noise gives people time to adjust their stories. I needed silence. When I got home, I unlocked my door and stepped into an apartment that looked exactly as it should have. Nothing missing. Nothing broken. No sign of intrusion. That was comforting. And misleading. I set my keys down in the ceramic dish by the door and stood still for a moment, listening to the familiar sounds. The hum of the refrigerator, the muted traffic below, the faint tick of the clock in the kitchen. Then I went to my desk. The top drawer slid open easily. Too easily. It had been opened recently. I could tell by the way the paper edges no longer aligned the way I leave them. Someone had been learning my system. I didn't sit down right away. I walked through each room slowly, not searching, just observing. The bookshelf, one volume slightly out of place. The file cabinet, locked, but warm, as if touched earlier in the day. The chair by the window, angled differently than I leave it. Small things, harmless things, the kind of things people stop noticing when they assume you don't notice anymore. I returned to the desk and took out a notebook I hadn't used in years. No labels, no markings, just clean pages. I wrote the date at the top. Then one sentence. Today, I learned that someone else is telling my story. I capped the pen and placed it carefully beside the notebook. This wasn't panic. This was orientation. Whatever was happening, it had started earlier than I realized. And it would continue whether I reacted or not. The only choice left to me was whether I would remain a character in someone else's version of my life, or quietly take the narrative back. I turned off the light in the study and went to make coffee, moving slowly, deliberately, exactly as the man in that folder was expected to move. Let them believe it. The more certain they became, the more records they would leave behind. And records, unlike people, don't improvise. That afternoon, I did nothing unusual. I made coffee the way I always do. 2 spoons, no sugar, cup warmed first. I sat by the window and watched people move through their routines with the confidence of those who believe tomorrow will resemble today. That belief is a luxury. I spent most of my life knowing better. By evening, the phone rang. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Long enough to seem distracted. Not long enough to appear evasive. "Hey," the voice said, familiar, practiced. "Just checking in. You sounded a little off yesterday." Concern, lightly applied. Not too much. Too much would invite questions. "I'm fine," I said. "Just tired." A pause. The kind that isn't about listening, but recalculating. "Well, you know," the voice continued, "people worry. After everything, we just want to make sure you're supported." There it was again. That word, supported. It doesn't mean help. It means oversight. "I appreciate it," I said. "Really?" That was the correct response. Gratitude reassures people they're doing the right thing. After the call ended, I wrote down the time and the name in the notebook. No commentary, just facts. Then I opened my laptop and began doing something I hadn't needed to do in years. I reviewed myself, not my memories. Those are unreliable under pressure, but my traces. Digital, administrative, institutional. Every person leaves a wake. Most never bother to look back at it. I did. Medical portals first, then insurance, then banking notifications. Nothing overt, no frozen accounts, no alerts, yet, but there were changes. A secondary contact added where there hadn't been one before. Consent boxes pre-checked. Preferences adjusted, for convenience. All reversible, for now. That's how systems work. They don't seize control in one motion. They create momentum, then let gravity do the rest. By midnight, I understood the shape of it. Someone hadn't accused me of anything. They'd simply begun answering questions on my behalf. The trick wasn't proving I was capable. The trick was preventing the moment when proof would no longer be required. I slept lightly, waking often, not from fear, but from calculation. Every time I drifted off, a different question surfaced. Who started this? Who benefits first? And who's quietly waiting for it to be finished? In the morning, I dressed carefully. Not well, not poorly, neutral. The kind of man no one remembers describing later. I had an errand. The building was quiet when I arrived. Fluorescent lights, low voices, the smell of paper and recycled air. Places like this all smell the same. Designed to keep emotions out. I took a number and waited. When my turn came, the clerk smiled with professional kindness and asked how she could help. "I'd like a copy of my file," I said. She hesitated. "Just a fraction." "Which one?" "All of them." That did it. Her fingers paused on the keyboard. She glanced at the screen, then back at me. Her smile softened, adjusted. "I'll need to check something." She stood, walked to a side office, closed the door. I didn't follow with my eyes. People noticed that. Instead, I studied the posters on the wall. Smiling faces, simple slogans about care and dignity. 10 minutes passed. When she returned, she didn't sit. "There are some procedural steps," she said gently, "before records can be released." "Of course," I replied. "What kind?" Another pause. "Just to ensure everything is appropriate." "Appropriate." I nodded. "I understand." She handed me a form. Routine on the surface, but I'd read enough of these to see the hidden teeth. Language about guardianship without using the word. Assistance without limits. Safeguards that only worked in one direction. I didn't sign. I folded the paper neatly and placed it back on the counter. I'll review this at home, I said. Thank you for your time. She looked relieved. That told me more than the document ever could. They weren't ready for resistance yet. They expected confusion, delay, compliance, not refusal. When I stepped back outside, the air felt sharper. Real, honest. I took out my notebook and added another line. Phase 1 confirmed. Soft control. They were building a version of me that didn't argue, didn't decide, didn't need to be consulted. The danger wasn't that they thought I was unstable. The danger was that they believed I wouldn't notice. That belief was about to cost them time. And time, when handled correctly, becomes leverage. I walked home slowly, already planning my next move, not to confront, not to expose, but to document. Because the moment you prove you're sane is the moment they decide you're difficult. And difficult people get handled faster. I intended to be something far more dangerous. I intended to be correct. By the third day, the pattern stopped pretending to be subtle. Letters arrived that I hadn't requested. Appointments appeared that I hadn't scheduled. Helpful reminders slid into my inbox with the confidence of decisions already made. None of it was aggressive. That's the genius of it. Aggression invites resistance. Concern invites surrender. I ignored the messages, not all at once. That would look erratic, but selectively. Enough to appear busy, not avoidant. Then I did something most people never think to do. I called a number that wasn't meant to be called. It was listed deep in a footer, beneath compliance language and automated menus. A department name without a direct purpose. The kind of office that exists to catch mistakes no one admits to making. After 4 transfers, a man answered. Older voice. Tired. Not scripted. Yes, he said. I'm calling to verify a record update. I replied calmly. A consent modification. Dated last week. Silence. Keyboard clicks. That update wasn't submitted by me, I continued. So I need to know who authorized it. Another pause. Longer this time. Sir, he said carefully, that information isn't usually. I know exactly what information isn't usually shared. I cut in, politely. I also know what must be logged internally when a third party initiates it. That did it. People like him don't respond to anger. They respond to precision. More typing. There was a recommendation, he finally said. From a family contact. Nothing binding. Just precautionary. Which family contact? I can't disclose that. You already did, I said quietly. By not denying there was only one. Silence again. I let it sit. You should also see, he added after a moment, that the recommendation triggered a monitoring flag. There it was. Monitoring of what? I asked. Decision consistency. Financial activity. Medical compliance. In other words, I said, my autonomy. He didn't answer. Listen, he said instead, lowering his voice. Off the record. This happens more often than you think. Someone expresses concern. Systems align. No one feels responsible. And when does it stop? I asked. When the subject confirms the need for support, he said. Or when the subject becomes too inconvenient to manage quietly. Thank you, I said. You've been very helpful. I hung up before he could retract anything. Then I sat there, staring at the wall, letting one truth settle in. This wasn't about me losing control. This was about someone else gaining it. I spent the afternoon preparing, not escaping, not hiding, but anchoring. I printed statements, downloaded call logs, archived messages, not to prove innocence, to establish continuity, because unstable people contradict themselves. Competent people leave trails. That evening, someone came by. A knock, soft, familiar rhythm. I didn't rush to the door. When I opened it, the smile waiting on the other side was warm, practiced, and just a little too patient. We were nearby, the voice said. Thought we'd check in. Make sure you're okay. I stepped aside and let them in. Refusing entry creates narratives. Hospitality dissolves them. They looked around, cataloging. Clean space. Order. No signs of decay or neglect. Disappointing, I'm sure. We sat. Small talk followed. Weather, news, concern, again, layered carefully like insulation. Then came the question, have you thought about getting some extra help? They asked. Just for a while. I smiled. I already have help, I said. I have records. They blinked. I have logs, I continued. Timelines, authorization trails. I know who initiated what, and when. The smile faltered. Not fear, recalculation. That sounds stressful, they said gently. Keeping track of all that. I leaned forward, just enough. What would be stressful, I replied, is discovering that concern was used as a substitute for consent. The room changed, not dramatically, no raised voices, just a shift. The moment someone realizes the ground isn't as soft as they assumed. I'm not angry, I added. I'm not confused, and I'm not unwell. I stood, but I am paying attention. They left shortly after, polite, controlled, uneasy. When the door closed, I wrote one final line in my notebook for the night. Phase 2 disrupted, awareness established. They would escalate now, not openly, never openly, but structurally. That was fine, because structures collapse fastest when someone understands how they're built. And I had all night to study. The escalation didn't come the next day. That would have been obvious. And obvious is sloppy. Instead, it arrived as silence. No reminders, no follow-ups, no checking in. Silence is not absence. Silence is pressure applied evenly. By mid-morning, my bank app logged me out. I logged back in without trouble, but the message lingered in my mind longer than it should have. Systems don't hiccup in isolation. They ripple. An hour later, my pharmacy sent a notification. Prescription review required before next refill. I hadn't requested a refill. I hadn't missed a dose. I hadn't changed anything. But the word review was doing a lot of work. I didn't react emotionally. I reacted procedurally. I called the pharmacy, not the automated line, the physical location I'd used for years. The same woman answered who always did. Her voice was friendly, familiar. Oh, yes, she said after checking my profile. There's a note attached now. Just says we need confirmation from your provider. Which provider? I asked. Pause. That's odd, she said. It doesn't specify. Just says care coordination pending. There it was again. Language without ownership. Has my prescription been flagged? I asked. Another pause. Shorter. More careful. Not flagged, she said. Reviewed. I thanked her and hung up. By noon, the pattern was undeniable. No one was taking anything yet. They were positioning. I sat at my desk and drew 3 columns on a sheet of paper. Action. Source. Effect. I filled it slowly. Each entry connected to another. Each concern created a dependency. Each dependency justified oversight. This wasn't about mental health. It was about administrative momentum. Once enough boxes were checked, no single person would be responsible for what came next. That's how systems avoid blame. In the afternoon, my doorbell rang again. This time, it wasn't familiar. A woman stood outside holding a tablet and a neutral smile. Professional, calm, perfectly forgettable. I'm from community outreach, she said. We received a request to follow up. From whom? I asked. She didn't flinch. A family referral. I nodded and stepped aside. Inside, she didn't sit until I did. Good training. She asked questions that sounded optional but weren't. How were my sleep patterns? Had I experienced recent stress? Did I feel supported? I answered honestly and precisely. No disturbances, I said. No confusion, I said. Yes, I manage my own affairs. She typed. Then came the pivot. Would you be open, she asked gently, to a short assessment? Just to document baseline wellness. Baseline. Another word doing quiet damage. I'd be open, I said, to reviewing the criteria used to determine the need for one. Her fingers froze above the screen. That's not usually. I know, I said calmly. But if a record is being created, I want to understand its framework. She smiled again, but this one was thinner. I'll note that you declined, she said. No, I corrected. Please note that I requested clarification. She hesitated, then typed. Good. When she left, I locked the door and didn't sit down. I stood in the middle of the room, breathing slowly, grounding myself in the one thing they couldn't argue with yet: coherence. I wasn't panicking. I wasn't isolated. I wasn't erratic, which meant the next move wouldn't target my behavior. It would target my access. And that meant I had one narrow window, not to fight, but to preempt. I opened my laptop and began drafting something I'd hoped I'd never need. Not a complaint, not a defense, a declaration, clear, documented, time-stamped. I wrote, I am aware of third-party concern reports submitted regarding my capacity. I contest their basis. I retain full cognitive, financial, and medical autonomy. Any limitation imposed without due process will be formally challenged. I saved it in 3 places. Then I did something most people forget to do until it's too late. I sent a copy to myself. Because the first thing systems erase is continuity. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something that settled my nerves instead of shaking them. They thought I was behind. They thought I'd react. They thought I'd stumble into the role they'd prepared. But I wasn't running from the system. I was mapping it. And tomorrow, I would take the first step that forced them to slow down. Not by shouting, by choosing the one place where records still matter more than stories. Right. 5. When you're ready. Morning arrived without drama. That, too, was deliberate. If something big was coming, it wouldn't announce itself with sirens. It would arrive as paperwork. I checked my email first. Nothing urgent. No threats. No ultimatums. Then I checked my physical mailbox. Inside were 3 envelopes. Different senders. Same tone. The first was from my primary clinic. We've received updated information regarding your care coordination. Please contact us to confirm your current treatment plan. No accusation. Just a suggestion that something had changed. The second envelope was thicker. County letterhead. Notice of preliminary review. Preliminary. Always preliminary at this stage. It informed me that a routine evaluation of support needs had been initiated following multiple independent concerns. Multiple. Independent. Words chosen to sound organic, not orchestrated. The third envelope was the most interesting. A bank logo I recognized instantly. Inside was a polite notice explaining that, out of an abundance of caution, certain account actions might require temporary secondary confirmation if unusual activity were detected. No freeze, no lock, just friction. I laid all 3 letters on the table and looked at them for a long time. This was the funnel, each institution acting independently, yet all responding to the same invisible signal. Concern had become currency, and my relatives were spending it generously. I didn't call anyone. Calling is reactive. Instead, I put on a jacket and left the house. My destination wasn't dramatic. No courtroom. No confrontation. I went to the one place systems still treat carefully, because mistakes there leave paper scars. A notary office. The woman behind the desk was middle-aged, precise, and uninterested in stories. Perfect. I'd like to execute a statement of capacity, I said. She raised an eyebrow. That's not common. I know, I said. That's why I'm doing it early. She nodded slowly and slid a form toward me. It wasn't a shield, but it was a stake in the ground. I read every line aloud before signing. Clear voice, steady hands. The notary watched closely, not suspicious, attentive. When she stamped the document, the sound felt heavier than it should have. Not because it changed everything, but because it changed timing. Next, I walked 2 blocks to a legal office I'd researched the night before. Not a family lawyer, not an advocate, a compliance attorney. I paid for 1 hour. Cash. I didn't explain motives. I explained patterns. Multiple concern reports, care coordination flags, bank friction, preliminary county review. He leaned back in his chair halfway through. This isn't about your health, he said. I know, I replied. It's about control, he continued. And leverage. He outlined what I already suspected, but hearing it confirmed mattered. Once a system begins to anticipate incapacity, it behaves as if it already exists. Reversing that trajectory isn't about proving sanity. It's about breaking consensus. You need independent counter-signals, he said. Documented ones. Medical, financial, legal. Otherwise, he added, you'll wake up one day needing permission to argue. That sentence stayed with me. When I returned home, my phone buzzed. A message from a relative I hadn't heard from in years. Just checking in. We're worried about you. There it was. Concern, again. This time I replied, I'm aware. I'm handling it. Nothing more. No explanation. No defense. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Because the fog was gone. This wasn't personal betrayal anymore. It was procedural aggression. And procedures can be countered if you move before the lock clicks. Tomorrow, I would initiate the step that made them nervous. Not by accusing anyone, but by creating a record they couldn't quietly overwrite. The next move had to look boring. That was the rule. Anything emotional would be framed as instability. Anything defensive would be logged as agitation. The system wasn't waiting for me to be wrong. It was waiting for me to react. So I didn't. I scheduled appointments. Not 1, 3, different cities, different providers, no shared networks. The first was a general physician. Routine checkup, blood pressure, memory screening. The kind of visit that produces numbers, not opinions. The doctor was young, efficient, and clearly had no interest in drama. Any concerns about cognition? She asked, eyes on her tablet. No, I said, but I want a baseline on record. She looked up then, just a fraction longer than usual. Baseline for what? For the future, I replied. So no one gets creative later. She smiled, not amused, but respectful. Tests were administered, results documented, no issues noted. I requested printed copies before leaving. The second appointment was with a psychologist. Not therapy. Evaluation. I was careful with my words. I didn't talk about betrayal. I didn't talk about fear. I talked about process. I've become aware of third-party reports questioning my stability, I said calmly. I want an independent assessment, on record. That phrasing mattered. The psychologist nodded slowly. You're not the first person to come in because of that, she said. We spoke for over an hour. She pushed. I answered. She circled back. I stayed consistent. At the end, she said, you're very organized. I've had to be, I replied. Her report would take a week, she said. I thanked her and left without asking for reassurance. The third appointment was the most important. A financial institution, not my primary bank. I opened a new account. Clean, independent, no family ties, no shared beneficiaries. When the clerk asked if I wanted to add an emergency contact, I declined. That's unusual, she said. So is what's happening, I answered. She didn't argue. That night, I scanned everything. Every receipt, every letter, every appointment confirmation. I created a timeline, not emotional, chronological, because timelines don't argue, they testify. 2 days later, the call came. Unknown number. I let it ring once longer than necessary, then answered. Hello? A pause. Then a professional voice. This is Adult Protective Services. We're conducting a routine follow-up regarding concerns that were brought to our attention. Routine. Follow-up. Concerns. I asked who had filed the report. We can't disclose that. I understand, I said. Before we proceed, I want to inform you that all future communication should be in writing. Silence. That's not typical, she replied. I know, I said again. But it's necessary. Another pause. We'll note that. Please do. The call ended. I stood in my kitchen afterward, phone still in my hand. This was it. The system had entered the room. Quietly, politely, but it was here now. And from this point forward, every move would either narrow my world, or expose the hands trying to close it. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was alert. The letter arrived 3 days later. Not certified. No warning. Just a clean envelope with a government return address. Adult Protective Services. I didn't open it right away. That wasn't hesitation. That was control. I made coffee. I sat at the table. I noted the time. Then I opened it carefully, like evidence. The language was polite, clinical, almost gentle. We are requesting a voluntary wellness visit to ensure your safety and well-being. Voluntary, requesting, ensuring. Words chosen to sound harmless. There was a date and a 2-hour window. They weren't asking if I was available. They were informing me when they would arrive. I didn't call to argue. I prepared. First, I forwarded the letter to myself from a secondary email account. Time-stamped, archived. Then I printed it. Then I placed it in a folder labeled Correspondence, External. Because nothing scares a system more than someone who documents calmly. I rearranged my house, not to hide anything, but to remove ambiguity. Clear counters, organized shelves, no loose medications, no clutter that could be framed as neglect. The day before the visit, I received another call. This one was different. Private number. I answered. Dad? My daughter's voice. Soft. Concerned. Practiced. Hi, I said. We're worried about you, she continued. You've been distant. I waited. Silence is a mirror. People talk into it. There have been reports, she added quickly, that you're not doing well. That you're isolating. Forgetting things. I see, I said. She exhaled. Relief. As if I'd confirmed something. We just want to help, she said. You know that. I do, I replied. Which is why I'm documenting everything. The line went quiet. Documenting? She asked. Yes, I said. Calls, letters, reports, patterns. Her tone shifted. Not panic, calculation. Dad, that sounds paranoid. There it was. The word. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. No, I said evenly. Paranoid would be assuming intent without evidence. I'm doing the opposite. She didn't respond. I have an evaluation scheduled. I continued. Independent. You'll receive a copy if you request it through proper channels. That won't be necessary, she said quickly. Noted, I replied. She changed tactics. You don't trust us anymore. That's not what this is, I said. This is about accuracy. Another pause. Then, softly. We're just trying to protect you. I know, I said. So am I. The call ended without goodbye. That night, I slept deeply. Not because I was calm, but because my plan no longer depended on anyone else's approval. The next morning, at exactly 9:07 a.m., a white sedan parked across the street. Two people stepped out. Clipboards, neutral clothing, measured movements. I opened the door before they knocked. Good morning, I said. Before we begin, I'd like to inform you that I'll be recording this interaction for my records. One of them hesitated. The other nodded. That's your right, she said. Yes, it was. And from that moment on, everything changed. Right, 8. When you're ready to continue. They stepped inside together. Not side by side, staggered. One slightly ahead, one observing from behind. That told me who was leading. The woman introduced herself first. Measured voice, neutral smile, clipboard held close to the chest. The man followed with a nod. No smile, eyes scanning the room, not me. Thank you for letting us in, she said. This won't take long. I gestured toward the dining table. I've prepared a place where we can sit, I said. It's more comfortable, and everything is visible. She noticed that. People like her always do. We sat. I placed my phone on the table. Screen up, recording indicator visible. Neither objected. Good. She began with routine questions. How old are you? Do you live alone? Any recent falls? Any trouble managing daily tasks? I answered calmly. Precisely. No extra information. Age. Address. No. 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 The man finally spoke. Do you feel safe in your home? Yes. Do you feel anyone is trying to harm you? I looked at him directly. No, I said, but I am aware that inaccurate information has been submitted about me. The woman interjected quickly. That doesn't mean anyone meant harm, she said. Sometimes family members overreact. Sometimes, I agreed. Which is why accuracy matters. She flipped a page on her clipboard. There were concerns about aggression, she said gently. Have you felt angry lately? I didn't answer immediately, not because I didn't know, but because timing matters. When someone files reports about you without your knowledge, I said, anger would be a normal response. I haven't acted on it. The man watched me closely. And memory issues? He asked. Any confusion? No, I said. Would you like me to demonstrate? They exchanged a glance. I reached into my folder. Not hurried, not defensive, prepared. I keep daily logs, I said. Dates, calls, correspondence. This is last month. I slid the folder across the table. The woman opened it. I saw the shift immediately. Pages, neat handwriting, time stamps, cross-referenced notes. This was not what they expected. This is very organized, she said slowly. Yes, I replied. Disorganization would concern me. The man leaned forward. May I ask why you're documenting so extensively? Because systems rely on records, I said. So do I. Silence. Not hostile. Recalibrating. The woman cleared her throat. We also received information that you were refusing help. I'm refusing unverified help, I corrected. That's different. She nodded. Once. Have you been evaluated recently by a physician? Yes, I said. Independent assessment. 2 days ago. I slid another document forward. Signed, stamped, dated. The man read it first, then passed it to her. She exhaled quietly. Cognitive function intact, she read aloud. No signs of impairment. No behavioral concerns. She looked at me. This is very helpful. I thought it might be, I said. They asked a few more questions. Basic, procedural, almost apologetic now. After 40 minutes, the woman closed her clipboard. Based on what we've observed, she said, we see no cause for intervention. The man nodded. This visit will be documented as resolved, he added. Resolved, a clean word. They stood. At the door, the woman hesitated. For what it's worth, she said quietly, most people don't handle this the way you did. I know, I replied. They left. I locked the door. Then I sat down, not to celebrate, to think, because a system doesn't make a move like this by accident. Someone had pushed, and they wouldn't stop just because one visit failed. I didn't move for a full minute after the door closed. Not because I was shaken. Because I was listening. Silence after pressure tells you more than noise ever does. No footsteps lingering. No voices in the hallway. No second knock. They were gone. I stood, walked to the window, and watched them get into their car. No rush. No tension. No follow-up call from the sidewalk. That meant one thing. This round had failed, but it also meant something else. Someone had expected it to succeed. I returned to the table and sat back down, exactly where we had been. I opened my notebook and wrote the time they left. Then I turned the page. Because now came the part most people never anticipate. The part after the inspection. When the person who made the report reacts to the outcome. I didn't have to wait long. My phone rang less than 20 minutes later. Unknown number. I answered. Hello. A pause. Breathing. Controlled, but shallow. They came, my niece said. Not a question. Yes, I replied. Another pause. Well? She asked. They found no cause for action. Silence again. Longer this time. That's good, she said, but her voice didn't agree. It is, I said. For accuracy. She cleared her throat. They told me they'd check in again if needed. They won't, I said. How do you know? Because now their notes contradict yours. That landed. You could hear it. The moment she realized she wasn't in control anymore. You didn't have to make this difficult, she said. I didn't, I replied. You did. Her tone sharpened. We were trying to help. No, I said calmly. You were trying to create a record. She laughed, brittle. You think too much. I think precisely, I corrected. She lowered her voice. You know how this looks, right? An older man, living alone, refusing assistance. People talk. Yes, I said. And people write things down. Another silence. Then, are you threatening me? No, I said. I'm informing you. She hung up. I didn't call back. I didn't need to, because the next move wasn't emotional. It was administrative. That evening, I emailed copies of every document, the visit summary, the medical assessment, the call log, to 3 places: my attorney, my physician, and myself, on a secured account. Then I did something most people forget to do. I filed my own report, not accusing anyone of malice, just stating facts. Inaccurate third-party welfare concerns submitted without my knowledge. Visit conducted. Claims found unsubstantiated. Neutral language. Professional tone. Permanent record. 2 days later, I received confirmation. Case closed. No further action recommended. Future reports flagged for review. That last line mattered, because it meant the system now required evidence before acting again, which meant whoever had tried to move quietly had lost the element of surprise. The next time my niece called, her voice was different. Careful, measured, as if she were choosing words from a script. "We should talk," she said. "We are," I replied. "No," she said. "In person." I looked at the calendar. Then I smiled, not with my mouth, but internally. "Fine," I said. "Come by tomorrow afternoon." After I hung up, I wrote one final note for the day. They thought the system would close around me quietly. They forgot I keep records. They arrived at 3:12 p.m. I know because I checked the time before opening the door, not out of nerves, but out of habit. People who plan things always arrive slightly late. People who improvise arrive early. She was neither. My niece stood on the porch with her husband just behind her, one step back, half a pace to the side. Close enough to support, far enough to avoid being the face of it. That told me who was leading this. I let them in. No greetings beyond what politeness required. No offer of coffee. No small talk. We sat at the table where the inspection had taken place. Same chairs. Same light. I didn't change anything on purpose. She started. "We're worried about you," she said, hands folded, posture perfect. "That's all this is." I waited. Silence is pressure when you don't rush to fill it. Her husband shifted. She continued. "You've been isolated, defensive. You don't return calls. You document everything. That's not normal." "It is for me," I said. She frowned. "You used to be different." "No," I replied. "You used to see me differently." That landed harder than she expected. She inhaled, then tried another angle. "We just want to make sure there's a plan. For the future." "There is," I said. "And we're not part of it?" she asked. "Not currently." Her husband finally spoke. "You don't have to push us out." "I didn't," I said. "You tried to move in." That sharpened the room. She leaned forward. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said calmly. "I'm being chronological." I opened my notebook. Not theatrically, not aggressively, just factually. I read aloud. "March 3rd. You requested access to my financial accounts, in case of emergency. Declined." She shifted. "March 18th. You contacted my physician without consent. Confirmed by office staff." Her husband's jaw tightened. "April 2nd. You asked neighbors to check in on me and report back." Her eyes widened just slightly. "April 11th. Anonymous welfare concern submitted. Visit conducted. Claims unsubstantiated." I closed the notebook. "You didn't start with help," I said. "You started with infrastructure." She crossed her arms. "You're paranoid." "No," I replied. "Paranoia fears imaginary threats. I'm responding to documented behavior." Silence again. Then she tried the last card. "You're going to end up alone." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said something true. "I already was. You just didn't like that I was comfortable with it." Her husband stood. "We should go." She hesitated, not because she wanted to stay, but because leaving meant something had failed. When they reached the door, I spoke once more. "If another report is filed," I said evenly, "it will not be handled quietly." She turned. "Is that a threat?" "No," I said. "It's a boundary." They left. I locked the door. Then I sat back down and wrote the final line of the day. They tried to turn concern into control. They forgot control requires access. Outside, the street was calm. Inside, the system had already adjusted. And from this point forward, nothing about my life would move without my knowledge again. The weeks after were quiet. Not the fragile kind of quiet that waits to break, the solid kind that settles in when pressure has been released the right way. No more visits. No more check-ins. No more concerned voices asking questions they already thought they knew the answers to. The reports stopped. The calls stopped. The system, once it realized there would be consequences, did what systems always do. It redirected its attention elsewhere. I received one final letter. Not a warning. Not an apology. A confirmation. No further action recommended. File closed. That was it. No ceremony. No justice speech. No villain exposed in handcuffs. Just a quiet acknowledgement that I was not the problem. I changed very little after that. I kept my routines. I kept my records. I kept my doors locked and my boundaries clearer than ever. I didn't cut people out in anger. I simply removed access where trust had been replaced by strategy. Some people mistake patience for weakness. Others mistake silence for consent. Both are expensive mistakes. What saved me wasn't strength. It wasn't cleverness. It wasn't even experience. It was attention. I noticed the pattern early enough. I wrote things down. I stayed calm while others rushed. That's all it took. Not to win. Just to remain free. Thank you for listening. Calm justice doesn't shout. It keeps records.